Delighted to be joined by Anneliese Dodds, who's the Labour Party chair and MP for Oxford East. Lovely to see you this morning. Thank you so much for joining me. First of all, what was your reaction to the Princess of Wales's cancer announcement on Friday afternoon?
Good morning. Well, of course, it's really awful to hear that news, very distressing news. But I think seeing that video really brought home, actually, that Her Highness is quite an incredible person. She's really sent out a message of hope and optimism, and I know that for people facing similar circumstances it really must have been a message that was very, very important for them as well, knowing that, as she put it, they are not alone.
As you know, she's faced a lot of criticism on social media, particularly. There's been a lot of trolling. First of all, should she be left alone? And second of all, what would Labour do to clean up the internet, particularly when it comes to anonymous trolls?
Well, there's been some really lurid speculation about Her Highness, of course, on social media. It must have been extremely distressing to her at such an incredibly difficult time. It would be difficult for anyone, but going through something like that in the full glaze of publicity, I think must be incredibly hard. We do think that more needs to be done, particularly when it comes to the kind of online abuse that we see so repeatedly directed, a lot of the time actually towards women, towards ethnic minority people. We need to be getting more of a grip on this. We think the internet companies need to be doing more. They're highly profitable companies. They do need to be getting more of a grip on this.
Yeah, do you think that actually people shouldn't be allowed to be posting on websites like X if they're anonymous?
Well, that question has come up, of course, repeatedly, but you also see people who are very happy to be identified, who've been propagating, in some cases, very extreme views, what would actually contravene UK law, and we've not seen quick enough action being taken by X. In fact, Yvette Cooper, who's Labour's Shadow Home Secretary, she revealed just a few days ago many, many different messages that were posted on X that would have broken, in fact, our hate crime and extremism provisions within the UK, and action had not been taken. So, really these companies have got to get far more of a grip, and we've been calling on government to push them to do so as well.
Well, I don't know whether it's by accident, Miss Dodds, but I can see you sporting the colours of red and white there amid this ongoing row about the England shirt. I know Keir Starmer has suggested that the flag should be changed. Obviously, it's not in red and white. It's a kind of multicoloured version. We've heard from Home Secretary James Cleverly this morning saying he thinks fans should boycott this shirt. What do you think?
Well, I don't know if Keir was going to be wearing it anyway. I think most of us feel that there's nothing wrong with the St George's Cross, that's what they should have been sticking with. But I have to say, when it comes to football shirts, there'll be lots of parents watching this, knowing quite how extraordinarily expensive it is to get the kits for their kids, how there's lots of different ones now, but also how, if you're a women's football fan, which I am, thinking it was a bit of a disgrace that we didn't get a replica kit, of course, for the England goalie, Mary Earps, at the time of the tremendous success of that women's team. So, I think it would be really good if this is focused on more carefully, because, football is so important to lots of people, me included. It's really important that people can support their teams in an appropriate way and really show that backing that they have for, especially for our England teams, both men and women as well.
So should they recall this shirt and maybe produce a cheaper one? 125 quid's not affordable for people, is it, in a cost of living crisis?
It's incredibly expensive, and actually if you look at the children's kits, for example, if you have the kids' names put on the back of them, my understanding is it's even more than that from what I've heard in the media. So this is very expensive. I would like to certainly see the companies looking at this, because we want our kids to get excited about football. We want them to then be going out and playing on the playing field, in the park, having that kickabout, getting fit. Football's incredibly important for us in the UK and other sports too, and everything that we can do to encourage that, I think, is important.
Now, you're the Shadow Women and Equalities Minister. I wondered what you think of Rachel Reeves, your Labour colleague, the Shadow Chancellor, trying to channel her inner Margaret Thatcher. Is Margaret Thatcher the kind of woman that Labour want to emulate?
Well, I think what Rachel said was that we're at a turning point, and that's absolutely right. And you don't have to agree with everything that Margaret Thatcher did. I certainly don't, to actually appreciate the fact that she did turn our country in a particular direction, as I say, in my view, in often the wrong direction, but she did turn our country in a particular direction. She had a particular political drive. What have we had over the last few years? Well, actually, we've had 5 prime ministers, 7 chancellors, 12 different failing plans for growth. No plan, no drive, no direction.
But it's a bit rich,
Labour,
isn't it?
ultimately, with Rachel, you would have that direction.
It's a bit rich, isn't it, for Labour to now be eulogising Margaret Thatcher when in the past the left have absolutely vilified her?
I think that's a misunderstanding. What Rachel has said is that at the time of Thatcher, there was that inflection point, that turn towards a different political direction. Doesn't mean that she agreed with the political direction that was then taken, but there was a political drive for a different Britain. I would say, and I'm sure, and I know that Rachel agrees, in many ways that actually turned our country, sadly, in the wrong direction. Now, the difference we've had with recent Conservative governments, it has been no drive, no direction, no plan, chopping and changing all of the time, and I'm afraid our country has suffered as a result of that.
Although some could say that Labour don't have a plan for paying for your pledge to decarbonise by 2030. What is the plan? Because we're yet to find out how on earth this is going to be funded.
Well, we've set all of that out in detail. First of all, we would make sure that there are the regulatory changes that we need. We would deliver a once-in-a-generation overhaul of the planning system. You know, it currently takes in the UK far longer than in other countries to make sure that there's planning permission for example, onshore wind.
How would you pay for it, though, Ms.
Dodds? By the current government, other critical infrastructure. Well, this has always been a partnership between the private sector and government as well. The problem is, however, we've not had government actually playing their part because they've made a mess of these rules, I'm afraid. They've got more and more complicated. That's why Labour would be delivering that reform.
I know, but we don't know how you're going to pay for it.
A national sovereign wealth fund. Well,
will taxes go up? Will spending go up?
So that was about regulation, what I just talked about, which is important. That's not to do with public spending. It's a different area of government activity. We have set out plans, for example, for a national sovereign wealth fund. Now, that would be partly by plugging the holes in the windfall tax that the government sadly has left after they belatedly introduced that tax. But, you know, there's a big difference, Camilla, between what Labour is setting out, especially on taxation, and what we're seeing under the Conservatives. We've seen taxes going up 25 times under the Conservatives.
So they'll come down under Labour.
Households are going to be paying. Well, our instinct is always to make sure that working people are not paying the price for government mistakes. That's what's happened, I'm afraid, under the Conservatives. So, of course, our approach would always be to try and reduce that impact on working people. We've seen the opposite, I'm afraid, under recent Conservative governments. OK.
Very, very briefly, Ms Dodds, you say you believe in easier self-identification, gender self-identification, but also in protecting women's spaces. Isn't that rather oxymoronic?
Quite the opposite. We believe that it's possible to deliver change to the gender recognition certification regime. And sorry for viewers who haven't followed this in detail. It's a rather technical area, but currently there's a huge amount of detail that people have to provide. For example, if they've had some medical change, if they've had surgery, for example, to their bodies, they have to provide detail of every aspect of that. If they haven't, they don't have to provide that information at all. We believe it's possible to deliver those changes in a way that still commands public support. We're confident that we can deliver that in the changes that we set out, because just as you said, Camilla, it is important that we can protect single-sex spaces, but we also need to treat trans people with dignity as well. We can do both at the same time.
Anneliese Dodds, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning.